This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
"19 people dead and more than 170 injured in a tanker explosion in the eastern Chinese city of Wenling. Russia and Turkey postpone talks on the Libya and Syria conflicts. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this half hour. In sports, a Tunisian assistant referee relives his memories of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. We start the program in eastern China's Zhejiang province, where search and rescue operations are underway after Saturday's tanker truck explosion in the city of Wenling. The death toll now stands at 19, with 172 others injured. The huge blast set nearby vehicles on fire and brought buildings down. An official investigation is ongoing regarding the cause of the explosion. The truck belonged to a company which transports dangerous substances, and records show the business has been sanctioned on 10 occasions by authorities. Our reporter Xu Mengqi reports.
A powerful blast that burned down entire factories and shattered more residential buildings. The fuel tanker that caused the accident was in itself blown apart. Overnight, rescue workers brought in drones, search dogs, and live detectors to look for survivors, and more than 20 trapped have been found.
From the aftermath of the explosion, because it had been quite powerful and devastating. You see the road, obviously, the crack is quite wide, and the guardrails, they've all fallen down, and with clear signs of being burned.
What's challenging about this rescue operation is that quite a big area is affected. There were injured people from collapsed buildings all the way to the crop fields.
By Sunday afternoon, rescue workers have already found all the people reported missing, thanks to cooperative efforts from firefighters, special police forces, as well as volunteers.
Our communication with the emergency response and command center went very well, and all parties worked quite closely.
The 170-plus injured patients are now being treated in 6 local hospitals, with some of the more badly wounded being transferred by helicopters to the provincial capital Hangzhou for better treatment.
There were 2 blasts. When I heard the first one, I was at home, but just when I was running out, the second one happened.
Because the accident was a blast, we have 7 patients whose burns were over 90% of their bodies. Treating burns is a long process, so it won't be like the dangers will just go away in an instant.
For each of the severely and critically ill patients, local authorities say expert teams have worked out individual treatment plans, and they're also conducting further investigations on the cause of the accident. Xu Mengqi, CGTN, Wenling, Zhejiang Province.
Staying in China, Beijing has reported 8 new coronavirus cases on top of the 36 local COVID-19 infections detected on Saturday. The latest cluster brings the total in the capital to 51. That's just over the past 4 days. As a result, Beijing has temporarily closed several wholesale markets where the cases were first discovered, and further contact tracing is underway. The risk level in Huaxiang Fengtai district, where Xinfadi wholesale market is located, has been raised to the highest of a 3-tier system as tens of thousands of residents are tested. CGTN's Marco has the latest.
Yes, we have just heard from Beijing's Municipal Disease Control and Prevention Authority that the 8 newly confirmed COVID-19 cases are all connected with the Xinfadi wholesale market. What's alarming, though, is that they're not only workers of the market, but also owners of restaurants and convenience stores. Also today, we heard from the deputy head of the Fengtai district, the most heavily hit district of the recent increase in the confirmed cases. The district deputy head said that they are arranging for all the employees at the Xinfadi wholesale market to take the nucleic acid testing. So far, they have done the samples of over 5,000 people out of the 8,000 people they are arranging for the further testing. Also, they are arranging for the nearby compound residents to take the testing as well. But that number is much higher, as high as 46,000 people. So far, they have done 10,000 testing for the compound residents. In order to make sure the life quality of these residents under house quarantine and hotel quarantine, the district government has arranged for shoppers to buy grocery for them to make sure that they don't have to lower their life quality.
Well, Beijing officials say COVID-19 tests from the city's Jingshen seafood market have all come back negative. Nearly 500 throat swab and environmental samples were collected, mainly from salmon trading stands and the public area. Earlier reports said traces of the coronavirus were found on a cutting board which was used to handle imported salmon in the Xinfadi market, and that fish had originally been sourced from Jingshen. Well, Beijing's Disease Control and Prevention Center says the new coronavirus cases in the city might have originated in Europe. It says the situation is still under investigation, but a test suggests that infections could have been imported to China. Experts don't yet know if the virus was on the surface of contaminated seafood or meat, or whether it was transmitted by people visiting the Xinfadi wholesale market. Well, here in Africa, there are now more than 230,000 coronavirus cases, with more than 100,000 recoveries recorded. Reports show that 10 African countries account for more than 75% of all cases on the continent. South Africa continues to lead with the highest number of cases. The country has, however, carried out over 1 million tests. Meanwhile, Botswana's capital, Gaborone, is back under lockdown. This follows the confirmation of 8 new cases. The Southern African nation ended a 48-day national coronavirus lockdown late last month, but its borders remain closed, apart from returning citizens and trucks transporting essential goods. Meanwhile, Algeria is further relaxing its coronavirus lockdown. The government says it's easing curfew, allowing public transport to resume in cities and reopening more businesses starting today. Buses and taxis in urban areas can now restart services, but with a limited number of passengers. Taxis can only carry 1 client at a time. Authorities also decided to end a paid leave given in March to 50% of state employees. However, pregnant women and those with children will continue to receive those leave benefits. Well, turning to the UK now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson urged Britons to go shopping with confidence during a visit to a mall in East London, a day before stores reopen on June 15th. Non-essential services have been shut since Britain went into lockdown in March. It is one of the reasons why the UK's economy, which is heavily reliant on retail and the service industry, has severely contracted.
I'm very optimistic about the opening up that's going to happen tomorrow. I've been talking to the staff here in juice bars, shoe shops, M&S, everywhere, and they're very excited. They've done a huge amount of work. They're not sure quite what they're going to get tomorrow. Will they get, a huge wave of customers? Will it be a trickle? We don't know. But I think people should shop and shop with confidence, but they should, of course, observe the rules on social distancing and do it safely as well.
Well, there are safety measures and plans in place to keep customers apart while shopping. But Johnson said Britain's 2-metre physical distancing rule was under review ahead of a potential further easing of lockdown measures on July 4th. He said his leeway for adjustments will increase as the incidence of COVID-19 falls. Meanwhile, Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has now climbed to nearly 42,000. That is the second highest in the world. CGTN's Paulo Cabral tells us more from Sao Paulo.
Authorities are softening the pandemic quarantine in different parts of the country despite an overall rise in the coronavirus cases. Here in this commercial street in the city of Santo André in the greater Sao Paulo area, we already see several shops open, a large number of people on the streets, but also some measures like distribution of hand sanitizer, also agents taking the temperature of people. Nevertheless, Brazil has the second largest number of COVID-19 deaths in the world, behind the United States. Brazil also has the largest number of daily deaths in the world. And most experts say that this figure is underestimated because of the low level of testing in Brazil. Meantime, the state of São Paulo plans to exhume human remains buried at least 3 years ago and temporarily store them in containers to free up space for COVID-19 victims. Authorities have already ordered containers that will be delivered to cemeteries to store these remains until they have a final destination. The governor of the state of São Paulo, João Dória, who was praised during the early stages of the pandemic for enforcing relatively strict isolation measures, now faces criticism for the partial reopening of businesses in this state while the infection rate continues to grow. Some opponents of the plan say Dória gave in to economic and political pressure instead of prioritizing healthcare. Governor Dória says that the measures are following scientific advice and using strict health protocols, and that measures can be reversed if the data shows a worsening of the situation. On Friday, Mike Ryan, a top World Health Organization official, said there is significant pressure on Brazil's intensive care system, but he also said that the country was still generally coping with more than 90% of the ICU beds occupied. It's not the case here in the state of São Paulo, Brazil's richest and most industrialized region, where ICU occupancy remains slightly below 70%. But there is growing concern that the virus is now spreading to the countryside and in smaller cities of Brazil after hitting its main capitals and economic centers. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Santo André, in Greater São Paulo area, Brazil.
Well, let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, Russia and Turkey postpone talks on the Libya and Syria conflicts. And Black Lives Matter protests continue around the world.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. We start in West Africa now, where the United Nations mission in Mali, also known as MINUSMA, has confirmed that 2 of its peacekeepers have been killed in an operation in northern Mali. Now, according to a statement from the mission, gunmen attacked a UN convoy on Saturday evening near Tarkint in the northern region of Gao, killing the 2 soldiers. MINUSMA Special Representative Mahamat Saleh Anadif has condemned the attack. MINUSMA was deployed in Mali to support political transitions following a failed coup in 2012. Well, Russia and Turkey have postponed planned ministerial-level talks expected to focus on Libya and Syria. The 2 countries have been supporting opposing sides in the ongoing conflicts. According to the Turkish Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov decided to call off the meeting over a telephone conversation on Sunday. Lavrov and Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu were scheduled to visit Istanbul for the discussions. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the talks will be held on a later date, and no date has been set as yet. Earlier this week, the United Nations announced that Libyan ceasefire talks had already begun. Now, the death toll from a ship packed with African migrants that sank off the Tunisian coast last week has risen to at least 61. That's according to local officials after more bodies were recovered on Thursday. The vessel, which sank on Tuesday, was heading for Italy. Tunisian authorities have been burying the bodies of those migrants, among them the body of a baby. Now, in other news, we turn to the United States, where the death of yet another black man at the hands of police has reignited protests in the city of Atlanta. Law enforcement has released footage showing two officers struggling to arrest 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks. He resists before grabbing a taser and running away. It then appears Brooks points the stun gun in the direction of police before falling to the ground. The officer who fired the fatal shot has been fired, and the Atlanta chief of police has resigned. A lawyer representing the Brooks family says the officers acted against the law.
What it boils down to, black, white, Hispanic, whatever you are you not tired of seeing cases like this happen? We see from the protesters, we see from the people in the streets of all races now that people are sick of watching black men murdered. In Georgia, a taser is not a deadly weapon. That's the law. That's what the cops are trained to do. It's not a deadly weapon.
Well, staying in the United States, protests are continuing for a third week with growing demands for police reform. And as emotions run high, President Donald Trump is calling for national unity. Toby Muse has more.
From coast to coast, thousands of Americans took to the streets for protests that are now entering their third week to protest police brutality against the black community. Here in Lafayette Park, in front of the White House, the protest had the feel of a music festival. Still, people are angry. President Donald Trump has been noticeably more conciliatory. He gave a speech to the graduates at West Point, the country's most important military academy.
It was this school that gave us the men and women who fought and won a bloody war to extinguish the evil of slavery within one lifetime of our founding.
Trump changed the date of a rally he's due to hold in Oklahoma. Originally, it was scheduled for June 19th, next Friday, but that's known as Juneteenth, an important holiday that celebrates the end of slavery here in the United States. After an outcry by his opponents, he tweeted, "Many of my African American friends and supporters have reached out to suggest that we consider changing the date." And he did change the date, pushing the rally in Oklahoma to next Saturday, the 20th of June. This was a rare backdown from Trump. For weeks, there have been reports coming from within the White House that the president is considering a major speech on race in the United States. That speech has so far not come. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
Well, let's go to the Italian city of Milan now, where demonstrators vandalized the statue of an Italian journalist who defended colonialism. Indro Montanelli, who died in 2001, had bought a 12-year-old African girl as his wife in 1936. He later described it as a normal practice in the region at the time. Anti-racism protesters sprayed his statue with red paint and graffiti. Police have launched an investigation into the incident. Well, coming back here now to Kenya, as the world grapples with COVID-19, artists have been reflecting this new reality in their work. One such artist in Kenya is creating thought-provoking pieces aimed at fostering hope for Africa's future. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa reports.
From the brush strokes, the figure takes form. A woman nursing her children in normal times isn't anything out of the ordinary, but the mask the African woman in the picture wears adds a twist to the tale. And those are the details that spark the discussion that Del Kotengo is trying to start in a world battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Years of practice have led him to this moment.
My earliest memory of painting was when I was 13, around 13 years, when I was being mentored by my mom. I worked on that for a little while until I went to college, where I studied graphic design.
Dale went into theatre designing sets and then into film as a creative director for 14 years. Then he decided to return to his roots.
And I felt at this point that I needed to come back to my art and tell my own stories there, stories that actually impact my life.
Now in his workshop, he weaves tales about issues close to his heart. And when the COVID-19 pandemic struck the world, Dale decided to speak about it through his art. The Woman with a Mask is one of his most recent pieces. She represents the African mother, showing the continuity of life during what is a turning point for both Africa and the world.
My discussion is how the African people have actually learned from this experience. And right now it's out there. And again, it's something that will never, after this pandemic, this will never change, it will never go away. It's more of the education of the African people. The fact that our lives are valuable.
Through the use of bright colors and colorful African fabric, the artist promotes African scenery and the vibrant culture of the continent. And through his art, he also hopes to convey the message of resilience and Africa's ability to overcome COVID-19 if its people work together.
So that painting, I combine all those things together, talking about the pandemic itself, the race platform, the understanding of the African people and its culture.
Wherever his pieces find a home, he hopes they will inspire change in how the continent views itself and how it approaches a crisis. And he hopes these changes will last beyond the pandemic. An artist will tell you that the message behind a piece of art is whatever message that you, the viewer, assign to it. But for this artist, during this time, it is important that his artwork paints a picture of hope and transformation on the African continent during this time of COVID-19. Wilkes Anyabwa, CGTN, in Kiserian, Kenya.
Let's take a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, a Tunisian assistant referee relives his memories of the 2010 World Cup in South Africa.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
In your sports news, this weekend marks 10 years since the first FIFA World Cup on African soil. The 2010 edition in South Africa had 9 match officials from the continent. They went through a rigorous process before being tapped for the role. Tunisia's Bashir Hassani was one of those officials during the tournament. He now relives his journey to the 2010 Global Football Showpiece with CGTN's Adnan Chouachi.
Bashir Hassani remembers the road to the 2010 FIFA World Cup. The international adventure started at the age of 38. Bashir was 41 when he was picked up to prepare for the South African tournament.
The World Cup experience started in 2007. An international meeting of assistant referees was held to select the best candidates. There was fierce competition. The physical, technical and psychological tests were very hard. I'm glad for having succeeded at all tests.
Hassani was an assistant in the Slovakia versus Paraguay game in Group F. He also officiated a Group H clash between Honduras and Chile.
The first match was played without any problem. That's why CAF's Referees Commission gave us the responsibility for a second match. I'm proud for having represented my country and continent. The 2010 tournament was exceptional. I was lucky because it was the first FIFA World Cup on our soil here in Africa. It's the dream of any international referee.
The Tunisian expert said the African referee performance has improved in the last decade. Hassani asserts that the CAF's Referees Commission is holding several workshops every year to ensure a continued training of its members.
The strategy has changed since 2012. A new generation of talented Tunisia and African referees are present at all international tournaments. Their average age is low, they are very disciplined, well-trained and aware of all the latest regulations and updates in football.
The international referee believes that the privilege of organizing the FIFA World Cup could be granted to Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco. In fact, the three North African states have a modern and well-developed infrastructure to host the tournament. Bashir Hassani, the 50-year-old Tunisian combatant, had been a FIFA referee since 2003. Observers and sports analysts say his career was successful at the domestic and international levels. This long and rich experience could inspire hundreds of young referees in Tunisia and Africa. Abdel Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
In other sports news, Real Madrid's joint record signing, Eden Hazard and Spain international Marco Asensio, are both fit for the team's first La Liga match in over 3 months against visitors Eibar. That begins in just a few minutes from now. Hazard injured his ankle for the second time this season in February and was expected to miss the rest of the campaign after surgery, but the competition being halted by the COVID-19 pandemic gave him extra time to recover. Asensio, on the other hand, had missed the entire campaign since rupturing knee ligaments in pre-season and has also benefited from the long pause in action. Zidane now says it's good news to have two of his star players back in action.
The good news is that they both have had time to prepare like all other players, even having had a longer injury like Marco Asensio, but he is training normally with us. And so is Eden Hazard. They are both available and they will be with us, and that's great news.
In rugby news, New Zealand has become the first country to allow fans to return to stadiums after a 3-month break due to the coronavirus pandemic. Over 43,000 fans arrived at Auckland's Eden Park on Sunday to watch the Auckland Blues get a 30-20 victory over the Wellington Hurricanes. The competition was organised after Super Rugby, which involves teams from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Japan and Argentina, was halted in March due to the coronavirus outbreak. Super Rugby's return in New Zealand was aided by the government lifting virtually all restrictions earlier this week.
Love it. Oh, so good. Yeah, awesome. It was an entree last night, but today's the real game. The real game. Yeah.
It's pretty nice that it's back on, and it's good to see a big crowd as well. Bit of a change to a bit empty crowds lately.
Awesome. It's great to be out with the family, friends, mates, have a few beers. It's all good.
And that's where we leave it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on social media. I'm Lindy Mtongana. From me and the team here in Nairobi, thanks for watching and take care.